Hi everyone, welcome to the Care and Health Informatics cross-cutting theme meeting. We're going to have I'm going to give you a very quick hello, and then just going to point out we've got a couple of polls that are available to do if you fancy doing those. They're at the top right on the screen. In a minute or two, we're going to start hopefully a pre-recorded video of a presentation telling you a bit about who we are, what we do, that kind of thing. And then after that, we're going to have a discussion, a bit of a Q&A discussion to try and find out how you guys want to work with us, and we can give you a bit more information about what we're doing. I can see that Sarah's on here. I don't know if you want to say hi or anything, Sarah.
Yeah, sure, Ollie. Hi, everyone. Sarah Rogers. I'm the theme lead for the Care and Health Informatics, and I'll be helping answer any questions today and giving you any information. So please ask us any sorts of questions you want. There's none that we can hopefully answer them all, but there's none that's too basic. We realise this is a new area to many people. So yeah, please fire away.
Great. So if we can start the video, please, one of the Jameses.
Yeah, we'll do that now. Ollie, the polls on the right, are they to vote on those after the video?
They can do it now, during the video, after the video, I don't mind.
Okay, great. There are a couple of polls there, and we'll continue to add them as the video plays out.
Great, thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Ollie Butters, and I'm going to talk to you about the Care and Health Informatics cross-cutting theme, CHI as we call it, within the ARC. Now, I don't think we've had a dedicated CHI session before, so I'm going to tell you a bit about who we are, where we fit into the ARC, and I'm going to tell you about some of the projects that we're involved in to give you an idea of what it is we really do. And then after that, we're going to have some polls in this section, followed by some Q&A, so we can find a bit more out about you. So first of all, the team. This is us. I'm at the top. I'm the one talking to you. Sarah Rogers at the top right is the head of the group. Perhaps more importantly than what we look like, though, is our experience, the kind of backgrounds that we've got. We've got a strong geography contingent in the team. We've also got some psychology experience. I used to be an astronomer, so there's a picture of Hubble up there. Got some VR skills in the team. I guess a key skill that's shared amongst everyone is around data science. And data science means different things to different people. But generally, it's around dealing with big data. Big data can mean different things to different people. Could be that you're talking about very large data sets in terms of how much disk space it takes up, or maybe how many variables you're dealing with, or perhaps how quickly the data is changing, or whatever other measure of bigness you want to have. But a key common component to that is that it's very much around software development nowadays, being able to write good code to collect the data, to process the data, to get some insight out of the data. And we're very strong on that aspect in our team. Now, the pictures here were just some nice pictures of things that I could find. Obviously, our experience goes much broader than this. But I think the key takeaway is that we're an interdisciplinary team. Now, this diagram shows where we sit within the broader ARC structure. So we're a cross-cutting theme, so we are cutting across the middle. I think a diagram like this explains what we do a bit better, though. So this is a picture of the health data lifecycle. So if we start on the right-hand side with extraction, mining, and acquisition, this is about getting data. But once you've got data, you've got to do something with it. So if we move clockwise round, you need to clean the data, get it ready to do some analysis on, and then move around again. You can do the analysis, move around a bit more, we're up to visualization, things like plotting and trying to gain insight from graphs. And we get onto the insight and communication section. And then from there, go around to try and get some understanding and engagement of the data that we've collected. Often it's the case that once we've got that understanding and engagement, we then need to collect more data, because maybe we've solved the problem that we were looking to solve to begin with, but that's opened up new questions that we need to look at. Or maybe we didn't get good enough data to begin with, and we need to broaden the data sets that we've collected. So in terms of what we do, we sit more or less everywhere across the health data lifecycle within the team. And so I'm going to show you some projects that sit in different places on this diagram. So from a data collection perspective, the Children Growing Up in Liverpool birth cohort is due to kick off sometime soon, I think perhaps next year maybe. Now, this is a birth cohort that's going to recruit over 10,000 pregnant women and their families into the study. If you don't know what a birth cohort is, the idea is that you recruit these families when women are pregnant, and then follow them up at regular intervals throughout the life course. Now, that could mean getting them into clinics to be measured and weighed and scanned and various other things. It can mean sending questionnaires to people, or taking samples, blood samples and whatnot to do genetics on, also using secondary use data. So it's about collecting as much information as possible about people. And using that information, you can then look back at things as the children grow up. So you can look to see what influences perhaps parenting, family, genes, the environment had on child's development, perhaps how they get on at school, or how, if they develop diseases like asthma and so on and so forth in later life. Now, these kind of studies are really important because they measure so much information, they get so much data from the very beginning, which you don't get with secondary use data, or typically you don't get with secondary use data. So they fill a really important part of research lifestyle. Now, one of the key challenges to this kind of two birth cohorts in general and this kind of research is how do you engage potential participants? Pregnant women have a lot on their mind when they're getting close to giving birth. And how on earth do you persuade people to join in, to volunteer to a study that they may well be in for the rest of their lives when they're leading up to giving birth? So that's something that we're going to have to think about, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's quite a lot of involvement from ARC members when the recruitment really kicks off for this in the future. And we'll be involved in the data collection side of things within the CHI team. Now, once you've got data, you've got to be able to give it to people. So one of the things that we run within the group is the Place-Based Longitudinal Data Resource, PLDR. And this is a data repository where we keep different types of data depending upon how sensitive it is. So at one end of the scale, we've got secure data, which is HES data, hospital episode statistics. We've got the household health survey that we collected a while back. And that's very sensitive data. So we keep that locked up under lock and key. And we look after that very carefully. Then there's a set of safeguarded data that we've got. Now these are indicators that have been derived from other data sets and bespoke indicators that are sensitive, but we can give them to people under the right conditions. And we've got a process in place to make sure that people it's not for us to decide as researchers, or even data providers. Really, that's got to be down to the public. So the people that the data are about. And so public advisors are key to this. So we're starting to put together a set of public advisors who can help help contribute to questions about what is right and what we should be doing with data. So the Civic Data Cooperative will be a really exciting development. I think that's going to really kick off next year. So that's one to look out for, and that will do lots of different things. So carrying on with the use of data, so we're currently involved in a project called ACME. Now the HDR UK is a funding council in the UK. And within the North, 14 partner organisations have got together as a mixture of NHS trusts, integrated care systems and universities have got together to form a partnership. We've been funded by HDR UK with a HDR UK North partnership rather originally. So we've got several projects on the go under this banner. One of them is to have a look at the anticholinergic medication. Now this is a type of medication that is typically given to older people, and it's typically used for problems with bladder and bowel and mood problems. And around 20% of older people are prescribed this. One of the problems is that there's quite an interaction with frailty and other medications. That can cause side effects that can often end up with people having falls and ending up in hospital. So there's a bit of a problem that we need to solve there. So what we're trying to do is to develop a tool which can help assess that risk at the time that the medications are prescribed. And the way we're doing that is by trying to look at lots of different data sources. So we're not looking at individual cases. We're looking at tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. So we're working with Connected Bradford, who have an awful lot of their healthcare records in a secure environment and have been anonymised for researchers to use. We're going to do the same with Sale, who have the equivalent in Wales, covering the entire Welsh NHS. And then we're also going to do the same with the NHS Trust on the Wirral as well. And the idea is that the different data sets will be, the algorithms developed will be able to run on the different data sets. We'll make sure we've got a good coverage of people. And then ultimately, we hope that any tool that we develop will make its way into real world prescribing. So moving around the data lifecycle a bit more, we move on to data visualization. So we've got a few different plots here. On the right is a plot from the team, a nice geospatial plot. It takes quite complex information, and it becomes very clear looking at the picture where there are hotspots and not around different indicators that this kind of diagram shows. At the bottom, we've got infographics, which try and really distill out key messages even more to a much simpler message. And then the two in the middle at the top are both virtual reality screenshots. So these are best viewed in 3 dimensions in a VR when you can walk around and touch things. I think the top one is a plot of height versus weight, different age groups for a group of people as they're growing up. And you can see a pattern as it changes there. But the reason this is useful to do in VR is because you can start to see trends that are very difficult to see in 2 dimensions. Now, this would be this would be a series of 10 plots on a piece of paper plotted side by side, and you wouldn't see detail in the same way that you see with this. You can interact with it and touch things and move things around. And the plot or the diagram in the middle is a representation of a statistical model. It's a generalized linear model. And we've used virtual reality to show that you can interact with the outputs of a generalized linear model and find out information about it in a much more intuitive and natural way than you get from looking at it on a bit of paper. And we found that people that play around with it in VR understand the output of the model better than when looking at it on paper. So that's an interesting bit of work that we're doing at the minute. So then coming around a bit more with the data lifecycle and get to public messaging. Now, OCRA is a national organisation that's been set up by the Wellcome Trust. It's one of the big funders. And the idea is that they work across the entertainment industry, so TV, film, media, gaming, and the arts. They bring researchers and lived experiences together to collaborate on storytelling and getting real life health messages out to people. And this has never been more important than today, in my opinion. We've really got to make sure that we're getting accurate messages out to people in a timely and engaging way. And working with the entertainment industry is probably the best way for us to do that. And Becca's on the board for that. So that's taken us all the way around the health data lifecycle. So in summary, we are an interdisciplinary team in CHI, and we work across the whole data lifecycle. And we're keen to talk to other ARC members about projects. Now, those could be projects you've already got on the go, could be projects you're thinking about doing, or maybe you're just a bit stuck on some data science project you've got on the go and you just need a bit of help. Then, we're quite keen to talk to you to see if we can help. So here's our email address. And with that, I think we're now going to jump into the few polls and the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Ollie. That was really good. It's nice to see.
So do we have any questions about that presentation?
While we're waiting for some to come in, I've just seen that we've got 36% public with us today. So I'm just going to make a discussion about the definitions that or the terms that you used that I'm not sure that people will understand, which is secondary use data. So I'm not sure if everyone will know what that is. So these are data that are directly collected primarily and firstly for your direct care. And what happens is that the data are anonymized usually. And so any names and addresses are stripped off, and then researchers can get access to them to look at the data that are in an anonymized format for secondary use, which is why we call them secondary use data. I just saw a question in the chat from...
Thank you, Sarah, for explanation.
Oh, you're welcome. Hi, Saika. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
What did you think of Ollie's presentation? Did you hear anything new there?
It was brilliant, I think, very informative. Obviously, when you can see people on a presentation rather than already recorded is different. So it's nice, then we can talk to you directly and Ollie. So it was very informative. Thank you.
Hillary's asking for the questions because of course you can't see the questions. Sian, would you be able to dump them in the chat?
Yeah, of course, I'll do that now. I won't be a minute, Hillary.
Thank you.
Ollie, I really loved your presentation. It was great. There were two things that I really liked and I wanted to see whether you can expand a bit more. First, about the different visualization and the interactive visualizations that sort of like what kind of projects have you or sort of like are you supporting? I liked sort of like can you explain a little bit more about how you sort of like you explained the regression, for example, and what did you do to make it more relatable to to your audience. I would like to find out how to sort of like I can do it with questions that I get about models. And the second was about the ARCFEST, if I pronounce it correctly, and how can we get maybe get some support from this kind of initiatives for our projects. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. So I'm going to let Becca answer those two questions.
Hi, yeah, so both of those activities are part of my independent research that I do in my fellowship. So in terms of the visualizations, so you're asking about the interactive, I guess, so the reason why we chose to investigate interactive data visualizations in virtual reality is because you have a lot more space to play with. So it's, you know, you can imagine the data is completely surrounding yourself in the 360 degrees all the way around. And you basically have 4 dimensions in which you can put stuff into. And so what we found is that even if people don't have any statistical training in building, for example, statistical models or interpreting statistical models, using virtual reality as almost like a graphics interface or like a point and click interface, they can actually interpret these models a lot easier than through like traditional pen and paper methods. And those results from a study that I've just recently conducted. And so the big driver for doing that piece of work was because we were trying to find, I guess, interesting and engaging ways and alternative ways of presenting data, particular to audiences that are not familiar with the sorts of statistical analysis that we do, for example, in epidemiology. In terms of OCRA, my suggestion is to visit their website, which is okra.org, so okre.org. And they run really regular public events, public seminars, and also seminars for professionals within the creative and entertainment industries, as well as different sectors of health research as well. And my suggestion is to tune into something that's relevant there and then to follow them up with some of their events. They are due next year to launch some funding cycles for some cross-collaborative work between research and entertainment sectors, but I don't yet know what shape these will look like. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yes, thanks.
So we've got a few questions in the chat. Have you thought about using a data mining tool known as Promlight? I have to say, I've never heard of that. I don't know if, Jamie, you want to perhaps talk a little bit about it. Is that something you've used? Sorry to put you on the spot a little bit there. Oh, maybe not. What else? So looking back at the polls, I can see that for the question, what's the biggest blocker for you to use data in your organization better? The biggest one that people have picked is other at 45%. So I'd be really interested if people could mention what some of the problems are. Perhaps type it into the chat, or if you're happy to unmute yourself and tell us.
Has it been set up so people can unmute themselves?
Yeah, of course. Anyone, if you're watching via Zoom, just the normal method. If you're in the browser with us, just hover over the window and you'll see the mute button, so feel free to join in.
Thanks.
Ethics, yes, ethics, of course.
Data sharing agreements is one of our favourite topics, isn't it?
I'd say data sharing agreements take up far more time than they need to. They're obviously very important and they've got to be done, but it just seems that certainly I find arguing over the minute details of language between organizations is the biggest problem with data sharing agreements. Often both sides mean exactly the same thing. It's just the different legal teams have different words and different ways of phrasing it. And it's one of those things where you wish, and certainly I wish, there was a way of harmonizing data sharing agreements between organizations so that we could cut that back a bit. It's just so frustrating sitting around waiting for data sharing agreements.
I think so the reason some people have put other down is because they are public advisors, so they're not actually associated with an organisation. So that's why. So I wonder whether it might be useful to talk about, just to reiterate what you were saying about the Civic Data Cooperative and about engagement with that and how we might involve them in our theme in terms of setting up processes and things like that, especially for the LDR.
So you asking me to talk about something around?
Yeah, you could do, or I could set myself up to talk about it, I guess.
I think you volunteered, Sarah.
Oh, okay. So some of you may have heard Costas talk earlier about the place-based longitudinal data resource, and then Ollie mentioned it again. So you can see some of the applications and see some of the data, like hospital admissions and things like that, behind the indicators that Costas has made. So what we do is when we have new projects that either come through the ARC or researchers want to do, then we have to make sure we follow some processes for governance. So to make sure that what is being proposed is reasonable, and the public agree with it. So what we're trying to do at the moment is reinvigorate that process, and using the best knowledge that Ollie and Becca bring with them from over Newcastle University, working over there on a different system, and sort of making sure that we have a good process in operation. So, for example, Ollie mentioned the other day that we might get a report from a professional who's looked at the data in terms of the technical security risks, and then that report might be given to the public advisors so that they can look at that in context as a whole. Is that right? Throwing it back to you now, Ollie.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think when we talk about governance of data and the rules around how we give data to people, there are two different sides to the coin. There's the legal aspect, what we can do according to things like GDPR and related, and then there's the flip side to that, the sort of social contract that we have. That's more the question of should we do it or not. And when we're talking about giving data to people, it can be really difficult to understand what people want to do with the data. Even me as a researcher, when somebody else says they want to do something with the data, I don't always understand what they're talking about. And so having a process and a mechanism in place to make sure that everyone can understand what's really being asked of for the data is really important. And that's, as we develop our committee, our governance committee, that's going to have to be a key part of it. We've got another comment in here from Tony about one of the problems being the data that they need not being in a structured format, which is that's a big one. I guess going back to that health data lifecycle picture from the first couple of slides, that it's a cycle, it goes round in circles, but such a big part of that is preparation of the data, whether it's restructuring the data or extracting subsets of the data that you need to get bits that you need. I'd say the good news is that tools are getting better at helping you with that, and being able to get a summary of data automatically without having to analyze it, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, that's a big problem. Right? It's a big time-consuming bit of work that we have to do.
Yeah, I'll butt in, and I think the issue is that what you're talking about here really is secondary use of data. So you can see that the data can be used usefully, but what you want to do with it was not the reason it was collected in the first place.
Yeah.
So what we need is a way of collecting data within the health service that actually makes the health service work better, which also facilitates the public health research that's been proposed here. So that means we all have to talk together and agree a way of working.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I'd say one of the big problems we have with that is, even if we all started working in the same way today and got everything working as we wanted going forward, we still have to deal with all the historic data that's there. So I do completely agree.
Yeah, I don't know whether Paula Williamson's on the call, but I'm sure she'll be making a plea for us to agree the really important things to measure and make sure that we at least collect information on those.
Yeah, that's really important, Tony. Thanks. Did James want to come in there, or is it just no? Okay. I was going to mention that in terms of health inequalities, for instance, and someone's raised missing data as well, that ethnicity is a variable that we often want to make sure we've got collected and well populated, and often the way that the variable is asked for, well, sometimes it's not asked for, and if it is asked for, then it's asked for in a way that lends itself to creating, for people not wanting to fill it in, so it creates missing data. So if we just think about that one variable for a minute and record that correctly before we start talking about any health data, then that's a useful starting point.
Just going back to the polls again, on the question, what's the biggest blocker for you to use data in your organization better? So the other option, there's lots of people filling that in, but as has been mentioned, that may well be people that don't belong to organizations that are doing it. So looking at some of the other answers, the most popular one is we don't have the skills at 21%. Now, within the ARC, we do have an internship program that we've been helping people with. I don't know if somebody's better placed to talk about that than me.
That'd be me.
Oh, go on then.
So I suppose I'm not sure. So the one thing I don't know is, I don't know, Sarah, how often the internships come up, whether there's an annual call for the ARC internships, or is it, I don't know.
There might be a couple more rounds. I think there's one open at the moment, isn't there? So just get in touch if you think we can help you to train you up in any way. I guess that's the answer to that. But the other way, of course, is that we've got Ollie. so I know you're very busy, Ollie, already, even having only been with us since June. But theoretically, we could get you to have a look at some data and help you pat it into the right shape if you could directly help them. But yes, I agree with your first port of call would be to build capacity with our partner and member organisations. So yeah, we could do a bit of both, I guess. So get in touch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to have informal chats with people about problems they're having. I'm sure everyone else on the team would be happy to as well.
Yeah, definitely. I can try and answer some questions and guide you as well.
Yeah, so I suppose I could talk a little bit about about one of the ARC internships that I'm currently supporting. So this is someone who's a healthcare professional who is essentially doing their internship to do a little bit of, using the internship to do a little bit of research to understand about how their services are being used by the patients during the restrictions that were brought in during the pandemic versus before. And I guess the kind of support that I'm giving are helping this individual to actually unpick, I guess, the process of where do they begin with this data, because there's a lot of data, you know, it's been mentioned earlier, it hasn't been collected for research purposes, it's been collected to facilitate care. However, I'm helping her to understand how we could actually use this data for the questions she's trying to understand, the research questions she's trying to understand. And so part of this is, I guess, just advice and suggestions, maybe giving some guidance and direction around perhaps how to process that data prior to analysing it, like how to categorize it or code it into a slight, or reformat it into a much more usable way for the types of analysis they need to do. Another thing I've been doing is giving advice on the types of software tools that we have, for example, available within the university that perhaps the individual doesn't have access to at their host organisation. And so we can set up honorary contracts to allow that person to, well, honorary contracts and also data sharing agreements, I should say, so that the data can be used within the university system with the university softwares and licenses that we've got, just to help and make that analysis a lot easier, rather than trying to wrangle with this actually quite a large data set in something like Excel, which can get very messy very quickly. So yeah, so that's basically what I've been doing at the moment. And I think that in the new year, we'll be looking at the types and range of statistical analysis that they could do that would help draw out, you know, something interesting things that they wanted to find out about. So this kind of support can be done pretty much by, I think, everyone in the CHI team. And I guess it's just a question of whether it's through a collaboration with CHI as part of the ARC, or whether it's through these ARC data internships.
Thanks, Becca. That's really clear. Hopefully that's given some people some inspiration. Oh, got a question there from Jamie Hunter. So could we actually use a University of Lancaster course to help train PhD students and public advisors to understand health informatics better? Potentially, if that was suitable. It depends on what your stage of understanding is. We've actually been talking to the ARCFEST in Bristol, who have run a number of workshops in the last 2018, 2019. So I think what we're probably going to do, rather than a university course, is just try and run some of those videos and workshops. We've got some pre-recorded videos on the different aspects of data science and health informatics. So what we want to do as part of the Civic Data Cooperative, going back to that big data initiative in the Liverpool region, is to try and increase the knowledge of our public advisors that way, first of all. But maybe it's something that a course could be something useful further down the line. That's true. Thanks, Jamie.
So we've got a comment from Alan Griffiths. Says he worries about making assumptions. Worries about making assumptions from the data or using data to prove a theory, which can be wrong. Now that's, yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's such an important bit of the research life cycle. I mean, one of the things that, so when you think about doing research on data, particularly secondary use data, you know, data that's come from elsewhere, it's my view that the actual doing the maths on it, calculating something from that data, I mean, obviously that's very important, but that's not the whole picture. In fact, that's a relatively small part of it, really. you have to spend so much time making sure that you do understand where the data has come from, understanding the provenance of the data, understanding the assumptions made when collecting the data. The example that Sarah gave earlier was a good example of how phrasing questions wrong or phrasing questions in a particular way on questionnaires can completely skew the data and give the wrong answers or wrong interpretations of things. And it's, yeah, I mean, you're right to worry about that because it is such an important thing, but it is something that we do concentrate on a lot when we're doing analysis. It's not just a case of we get some data, quickly do a few quick calculations on it, and then there's our answer, job done. There's a whole lot more that has to go into it.
I think that's really useful to understand, Ollie, because it helps explain why sometimes we take so long to do things. And then when we get the results out, we'll follow all the correct statistical procedures, we'll test our hypothesis, etc. And then the important bit, especially for Alan and our public advisors, is actually going to you to help us interpret the data in the real world context. So as Ali said, we'll go back to the data providers definitely to work out how and why the data were collected, and as Tony said before, but it might be for direct care rather than secondary research purposes, of course, but also go back to our public advisors to help us interpret, and that's why they're such an important component of the work in the applied research collaboration.
I had a brief question, which was, I think in one of the polls there was a question about the barriers to around data use. The barriers for using data in your organisation. So so we talked about that. 21% of people said they feel they don't have the skills. I was just wondering whether people could just type in one of the chat boxes, perhaps what sort of skills they feel they're missing in their organisation. Because is it the statistical and analytics side of things? Is it the domain precursor knowledge that's needed in order to interpret, perhaps the science or something coming out of that, or to link it back to the real world? Or is it maybe particular techniques that people are interested in, such as, can you use machine learning or something like that? I'd just be interested if people could just type in the boxes. That would be really helpful for us to understand that a bit. And then I guess the last question I put up was concerns around data use. And so, so data privacy and interpretation are the two highest scoring ones there. I don't know what to say about those. Both really big topics. Yeah. So, Tony, would you like to just expand on that comment for us if you're able to unmute yourself?
Yeah, sorry, struggling there with getting Zoom to behave. So I hope that comment didn't come from left field. I think it was vaguely relevant to what you're discussing earlier. And again, organizations collect a lot of data, and historically they often get reported to finance directors. So in the NHS, the model again is that there's business intelligence and they analyze hospital episode statistics, equivalent data, but the reporting and the development of those reports continues to be for finance directors and sometimes executive teams, but the clinical teams for whom those data might actually be most useful are out of the loop, and I'm sure there are parallels with that across health and social care, and we need to fix that so that the people on the front line are actually receiving data which might actually influence what they do on a day-to-day basis.
Very good point, Tony.
I'll get off my soapbox.
Actually, just following on from that, I'd just like to say that we've not had a lot of staff in care and health informatics from the last year or so, and Ollie and Becca just joined us in over the summer, which is great. But we've just agreed to hire another person who Tony knows, and I'm not allowed to say who it is yet, but they will be good at integrating with clinicians, shall I say, and I'll leave it there. So hopefully that will be improved, and we'll try and work to improve it.
Yeah, sorry, that wasn't a criticism of the Kai team at all. That's a criticism of what the NHS does with its data, and we can be part of the solution across health and social care, so that useful things are done with it to speed up the improvements that are needed.
And I know that a lot of really good work talking to clinicians was done in the Connected Health Cities programme, and so we'll be bringing some of that expertise into the care and health informatics as well, which sounds like it's right on track to helping with that. So,
yeah, cool.
Great.
So we've only got, 8 minutes left. So I don't know if anyone's got any final questions they want to ask. So it looks like nothing else. So shall we finish a few minutes early, Sarah? And then if people want to get in contact with us, they've got our email address, and yeah, we're always happy to speak to people.
Sean,
Yeah.
email in the chat again, that'd be great.
I think I put the new one in, the Kai query at Liverpool. So yes, if anyone wants to get in touch that way about internships or generally about being involved with the care and health informatics theme, because I think we've got Saika Ahmed, who's been great at coming along to and helping with some other public advisors as well, about to help us out with the care and health informatics and help translate things to our public advisors. But if you want to be involved with us as a named partner and help out with Civic Data Cooperative as well, as we start to engage with the public there, that would be really helpful. So please do get in touch.
Okay, so shall we end the meeting there then?
Yeah. Time to have a tea for the next session. Yes.
Cool. Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Ali.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.